Tonight we're going to do the opposite. We're going to start with a guest, and we'll go to some calls at the bottom of the hour. Why? Because our guest is going to be on television doing a sports report and on TV in the second half of the hour, and we don't want him to be late for that. It's the great Larry Beil, who, man, I was thinking the other day, how many years have I known Larry? It's been a long, long time. Aloha means goodbye. I remember his ESPN days. We've worked together, not as much as I would have liked through the years, but he's with us on the UMA guest line to talk Niner football because I asked him to. I invited him on because I want to get his perspective. What's up, Larry? Good to talk to you, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since we've spoken, but people in the audience don't know how 20-some-odd years ago, they almost had Larry and Larry every afternoon on KNBR.
That's right.
There was a slight gap in money that was a factor, but and schedule. I should be fair, but we were razor close. We were that close.
Oh, it would have been an incredible combo. You worked on ESPN. And how many years at ESPN, Blair?
About six.
6. And then, but not ESPN radio, correct? Just ESPN.
No. I did plenty of ESPN radio. In fact,
you did ESPN radio?
Yeah, I did the college game day show. You want to talk about a shift to work. We did 8 straight hours of radio. Me and
Chuck
Baylor.
Wilson?
Chuck
Skip
Wilson
Bayless.
was with Tony Bruno, but Skip and I and Mel Kiper. Mel Kiper was the main guy on the college football, but Skip and I actually were good friends back then as well because we did some stuff out of the KNBR studios. Believe it or not. Anyway, but yeah, I know we did it. The radio network was in its infancy at that point. So
Sure.
If you remember Fabulous Sports Babe.
Oh, I'm Linda. I knew her well. I mean, I partied with her in New Orleans at the NAB convention one year, and I think mid-'90s. She's got a kind of a gravelly voice, but she.
Yeah.
How you doing? How you doing, Krug? That kind of.
Yeah.
She had a great show. She would have Mort, the late Chris Mortensen, was always on with her, and she had some of the most amazing guests.
Yeah, and obviously since then they acquired rights to NBA and baseball and a whole bunch of other things. So it's really grown exponentially since way back then. But we had a good time. I remember Mel and I, we every Saturday for 8 hours. Sometimes we go on the road and do like College Game Day does now on TV. I would just, a little bit of advice: if you can avoid a trip to Kansas State, do so.
Would they call it Little Manhattan or something like that?
Yeah,
or
Little Apple. Yeah,
Little Apple. There it is.
Land in Kansas City and then drive for what seems like the rest of your life to get to the campus. But nice people, freezing cold. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Larry, I'm glad that we are having you on to talk a little bit about the 49ers. Niners at the bye. The first half. You're watching it. You're engaged and know every step of this thing. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's just kind of an up and down affair. It wasn't like the Niners have been awful in the first half. They just haven't looked like a Super Bowl type team. They blew leads against the Rams and Cardinals, and they've given themselves very little margin for error in the final stretch of the year, the 9 games after the bye. They do have a great record. I think they win like 70% of their games under Shanahan after the bye, as opposed to like 40% before the bye. So I'm not sure why that is. But what is your takeaway from the first 8 games? Obviously, they're 4-4. The offense is struggling in the red zone. The defense is, kind of struggling against the run and the pass. And special teams has been bad. They've had some injuries. What's your takeaway on the first 2 months of Niner season?
Well, it would obviously have been different if you had a healthy Christian McCaffrey, and that's what I really want to see coming out of the bye, because he's the Swiss Army knife. He gives you a lot of different options, and he's built into Kyle's offense in such a way that it's really much more limited if it's not him back there. I mean, you could put Debo back there a little bit, but you don't want to get Debo hurt. So the play calling has to adjust for that. I think the defense and stopping the run is a huge problem. Actually, that goes back to last year's playoffs, which still hasn't really been meaningfully addressed. And on top of that, you got the wide receiver injuries, and Brandon Ayuk, unfortunately, out for the rest of the year. But also, that offensive line does not, outside of Trent Williams, does not scare anybody. I mean, Pooney's going to be really good, but the center, the left guard, the right tackle, I'm going to steal a Pat McAfee line of all people. There's plenty of upside growth potential there. Let's put it that way.
Well, in baseball, they used to say, "Hey, this guy sucks." Now they say, "You know what? There's a little too much swing and miss in his game."
Yeah. Well, we were harsher back then. Now it's kinder and gentler. We can't.
Right.
The kids are sensitive, Larry. The kids are sensitive.
It's true. You don't want to lose anybody.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Yes. We can't. People would be screaming at you all day long. Now you can't. You can't do anything. It's fine.
Brock Purdy. Okay, so there's people that are like, oh, Brock Purdy's been found out. Since that Raven game on Christmas, he's not been as good. But to me, I looked at this game and I watched it again, and then I watched the All-22. I thought this was an awesome game for Brock Purdy against Dallas. I mean, he ran, and to me, the way he ran, when he ran, how he ran, I think that was one of the biggest. I think his running has been one of the biggest pleasant surprises, even for this year when I knew he could move. But, I mean, he scrambled at least 4 times in each of the past 6 games. But he's just, when he takes off and runs, he runs with a purpose. He knows when to run. He gets man coverage. They turn their back on the quarterback. He sees a lane. He takes off. He's very decisive. I don't know. I see Brock Purdy as their franchise quarterback. And I know he's not Mahomes, and I know doesn't have the huge arm. But to me, he is not the issue. I mean, they're 4-4, and I don't see him as the issue. How do you make sense of Purdy and kind of where he's come from, where he is, and how people feel about him?
Well, this won't make for the best of radio, but I pretty much agree with everything you said. I don't think we'd even be having these conversations if he had not been the last player chosen in the draft. I think that's always in the back of everybody's mind. And the second he fails at something, that's what people are going to go to. But if you watch closely, you're talking about the run-in, which is, dare I say, Mahomes-like at times. That's the biggest difference between him and I was astounded when people could not look at Jimmy Garoppolo and then see what Purdy brought to the table. All of those would be sacks if Jimmy was back there still. Instead, he makes plays, gets positive yardage, and in many cases gets first downs. The thing that's troubling is, I look at his career completion percentage is 67.5. He's at 64.5 this year, and that could be explained by the lack of, 1 or 2 of his favorite targets. 10 TDs, 7 picks, unless, I got to get stronger glasses, but that's out of whack, especially career-wise. 54 touchdowns, 22 picks. So too many interceptions, and it just seems like Niner receivers are not getting separation, and he's being forced, or feels like he's being forced, to make some tight window throws that are much more dangerous.
And it's like they're not getting great separation. They don't have great speed.
Nope.
You mentioned the flaws in the offensive line. So at times he's getting pressure. I mean, like in that Kansas City game, I just saw a really good Kansas City defense and a great Kansas City defensive coordinator. And I just saw a defense that kind of sped him up. And, when you're sped up, sometimes you make some bad decisions. He made some bad decisions while he was sped up by their defense. I mean, the old saying, they get paid as well, or, the other side gets paid too. I mean, there's a lot of truth in that. And I don't know. I know people want to see, a direct shot to the top. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you covered the Niners for years. I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
Steve Young had like 5 turnovers in his first playoff game. Joe Montana was like 3-6 or something like that in his first 9 games. It's not a straight line. It's not like even if you got the goods, even if you're Hall of Fame worthy, it's not a straight line of success to the top from the bottom. I mean, it takes some growth. There's going to be bumps in the road. You know what I mean? It's just I just think maybe
Mm-hmm.
the fans' expectations might be a little inflated.
Yeah, unless your name is Mahomes, it's not like hockey stick type growth on the graph. And I think there are no perfect players, and Brock is reacting to a lot of the situations around him. So he'll be fine. I mean, especially if you give him the complement of weapons that he's used to having. Now, we could talk about game plan and play calling. That's a whole different thing. And I think Kyle schematically is brilliant. Don't always love the decision making, especially when do we go for it? When do we not go for it? It feels to me like he's aggressive when he should be conservative and conservative when he should be aggressive. So I get frustrated by some of that. But, obviously you look – and also I would say in that Kansas City game, I would have featured Kittle a lot more because you just didn't have the outside threats in that game. So, here we are, 4-4. The division is completely up for grabs. It defines mediocrity. I mean, I thought Seattle was going to have, this great offense. They're okay. And DK Metcalf, is a little bit banged up. Losing to Arizona and the Rams is kind of inexcusable, and that brings me back to what else you mentioned. I don't understand how your special teams can be subpar year after year after year. And if you just look at the Steelers, and I forget it's Smith, I think is his name, is like a 70-year-old guy that all he does is watch, film of punting and all this stuff. And they excel at it. So I don't know what the Niners are doing or not doing, but the production is just not there. So that needs to be resolved at some point soon.
I mean, look at their numbers. I mean, DVOA, which is kind of an all-encompassing measuring stat, I think they're like 5th in offense, 6th in defense, and 29th in special teams.
There you go.
I mean, that's just unbelievable, really.
Yeah, I mean, and especially on kickoff and punt coverage and punt returns, which has kind of been a non-existent part of the 49ers approach for many, many years. I don't know if it's just not a point of emphasis or whatever the case may be, but other teams spend a lot more time on it with better results. So, if I was in charge, which I will never be, of anything of consequence, then I would certainly – I'm sure they're spending time on it. Why they are having problems executing it is maybe it's personnel. Maybe it's guys who don't know which gap they're supposed to be in. I don't know. I'm sure Kyle, if you gave him some truth serum, would give you the real deal.
Well, they've tried everything, right? They had Richard Hightower. They brought in Schneider. Yep. Schneider had a really nice career going in Seattle. They spent a 3rd-round pick on Moody, a 4th-round pick on the punter. They spent free agent dollars on, special teams specific guys like Ray McLeod and George Odom, and it's not like they've played. I don't know what I would say to Lynch as far as how to get the special teams better. They've made the commitment. They've made the investment. It just hasn't happened. So it's like, and I feel bad for Schneider. He seems like a really good guy. My friends up in Seattle say he's a hell of a special teams coach. Well, if he's a hell of a special teams coach, then why are their special teams so awful every week? And they're losing games this way.
Yeah, and they are really, especially because they're playing a lot of close games. And if, 1 or 2 mistakes in special teams, and it flips the game. I don't know if it's Schneider or, Schneider could be the best coach on the planet, but if it's you and me running down on kickoff coverage, it doesn't matter how good a coach he is. I know there's better people than us, but you don't know. We just don't know. We just don't know. Whether it's the players not executing the plan, or maybe the plan is bad, or something else. I don't know. But when you go through 3 kickers in 3 weeks, that's just bad luck. Like, that's ridiculous. I'm sure that they don't spend, Jake Moody's not spending a lot of time on tackling technique. But, I mean, and then the next week you get separated shoulder. So that's just totally bizarre. I've never seen that happen before. I'm sure you've never seen it either.
No. Well, those Niner kickers can really hit.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, could you imagine the reaction if a couple 50-year-old guys were on special teams and there'd be people calling the post-game show, what? We got to get better special teams, man. Our special teams, there's guys, I saw those guys on the sideline. They're gray. I mean, they're old. They can't run. Here's a stat. The Niners this year, when Brock Purdy himself, this is not when the Niners don't turn it over. This is when Brock doesn't fumble it and doesn't throw a pick. They're 3-0. Okay? In his career, since Brock Purdy has become a 49er, when he doesn't throw an interception or fumble, doesn't turn it over himself, not the team, just him, they are 15-0.
Wow.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, that kind of illustrates the point. If Brock, I love you, Brock, and you're aggressive and he takes shots down the field and he's a great kid and he's a hard worker, he's a leader. I mean, Sam Darnold told him he taught him how to watch film. I mean, this guy's a grinder. Great guy, the kind of guy you'd want your daughter to marry.
Absolutely.
But don't turn it over, man. Just don't turn it over. If he doesn't turn it over, they've got the goods to beat anybody. Occasionally, I feel like now, maybe in his first year, he seemed like he took what the defense gave him. Now he seems to be trying to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more, let's drive it down the field. I don't have time for the take the check down to Kittle. I'm going to drive it down the field against McDuffie to Conley. You know what I mean? It's like, take the check down to Kittle and make the Chiefs play more defense, for another set of downs. I just feel like he's maybe lost some of his patience. We look at him and say, oh, he's dink and dunk. He's not dink and dunk. If anything, he's Brett Favre. He's like a riverboat gambler that takes maybe a few too many chances.
So he's comfortable now, much more so than when he first got in. But that's a double-edged sword because his confidence is high that he's going to try these tight window throws, and some of them are going to get tipped and batted and picked off, and you'd rather not see that, but that's part of him as his growth as a quarterback, trying and learning. The other part of it, and I'm circling all the way back to this, is, if you look at the early part of his career, it's 3 steps, hit your back foot, ball's out, or 5 steps, ball's out. Now 5 steps, and somebody's coming around the side, about to take your head off. And so I don't know that he's enjoying the same level of protection that he has in previous years, although the prior right tackle was not one of my favorites either. So I should really – you were a personnel guy. We should be in personnel. We really should be. I mean, we'll figure all this out.
There you go. We'll get Mel Kiper to help us if we don't have the answers. Larry Beil with us on the UMA guest line as we talk Niner football. 2 last questions for you. This has been a phenomenal rookie class. And to me, it's like it's kind of saving their bacon. Why? Because they did kind of miss out on 7 number ones, between the guys that they tried to make happen. It just didn't happen. I'm not saying, it's the worst thing ever, but I mean, they didn't miss on 7 firsts. They did trade a lot of their depth for Hargrave last year. And then the combination of those 2 factors and some injuries have kind of thinned them out. And I think they're a little thin right now as a team. I think that's one of their issues. But their rookie class is saving them. Who's your favorite rookie? Who's your favorite Niner rookie this year?
Oh, well, this is recency bias at work here, but Garendo coming off the last game was really impressive. I still don't know how a guy who runs a 4.3 gets caught from behind, earlier. But that's unless the guy chasing him runs a 4.2, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And also the one guy I want to see more of, because this is a feature the Niners just haven't had for years, is Cowing, because he has legit 4.3 or 4.2 speed. Stretch the field. Yes. So I love those 2 guys. Purdy's been great, a real find, and I think he could have an incredible career with many All-Pro selections. So that's just 3 of them. And look, in any draft class, if you hit on 3 guys that are going to be really good and fixtures in your lineup for years to come, you're doing a great job.
I mean, think about how loaded the Niners are. You just named Garendo, and you just named Pooney, and you mentioned Cowing, and yet the 49ers this week had the highest graded rookie of any team in pro football, and it was none of those guys. It was Renardo Green. Renardo Green had a 91.3 PFF grade. It was the highest of any rookie in the NFL last week, and he's just, he's so good that like you don't even notice him because he's kind of, a great corner you don't notice because you don't only notice him when they get burned. This guy's so good, Laird, that it's like nobody's really even noticing because he's just taking his guy out. I mean, if you ever interview him or send your, Chris down and he interview, the guy is serious as a heart attack. I mean, he is very, very all biz. But man, he's a hell of a young player. What a great young corner he is.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're talking about corners, we should also mention not a rookie, but the growth of Diamador Lenore. Fantastic, absolutely great. So, they've done a good job in terms of acquiring talent. The question is those positions of need, like tailback. It's hard to judge 4 and 4 without the full complement of players. And I know every team has injuries and all that, but the second half of the schedule gets a little bit rough where you got Seattle at Green Bay at Buffalo is a wicked double dip right there. I don't know if they're going to stay back east, but I assume they will. And
maybe the Greenbrier. Maybe they'll be in West Virginia there.
Yeah, it's possible. Ending the season with the Lions, who look scary. I mean, they were scary good in the playoffs last year. So this is not going to be easy, even if they get everybody back and healthy. I mean, we didn't even talk about Pearsall because he hasn't played much, but his story is just like a miracle come to fruition,
what a great
come
kid.
To life. Yeah.
Oh, he's such a great kid, too. I mean, he's willing to sit there and reflect on being shot. I mean, you would think most people would be like, hey, man, I don't want to talk about it. Let's not talk. He's like, this is how I felt. And I saw a picture of his mother in tears hugging the police officer woman who assisted him. And I mean, that's, that potentially could have been so unbelievably tragic. And instead it winds up being, a story that, is one that, is just hopefully just a footnote in this kid's career. By the way, you got to get Demo Lenore in studio. And you're the kind of guy, you've got the kind of sense of humor there where you could be like, Hyena, I've got a question for you. And, you could carry it out. I mean, you could seriously call him by his nickname, the Hyena, and probably get away with it. I feel like you have that. You've got that in your repertoire. You could make him laugh.
The first time he said that, I was like, wait a second. Who's he talking about? And then I realized he's talking about himself. I was like, wait, who's that? I thought, is there a nickname that I don't know about? What's going on here? Who's he talking about? He's talking about Metcalf. Who's he talking about? I'm like, he's the Hyena. Okay, all right. Now it makes perfect sense. He's
gold.
The aggressor. Yeah. No, that's, I mean, have you given yourself a nickname?
No.
No. Would you be the Hyena of radio? The Hyena of Bay Area Sports Talk Radio?
I don't know, but I just think it would be great to see him on with you, and you could just be, Hyena, I got a quick question for you. And he's the kind of guy that would laugh about it. I love interviewing Demo. He's fun, and he's cocky, he's confident. He's not afraid to boast. He's not afraid to say, hey, we're going to beat these guys. We're going to beat them by a ton. You know what I mean? Where everybody else, nobody wants to say that. Hey, last one for you, Lair. Shanahan and Lynch, these guys have been enormously successful, and they haven't gotten the Super Bowl number 6. Right. And we all know that's what it's all about, and that's what Jed's, judging, and that's what Dr. John is judging, and that's what all Niner fans are judging them on.
Sure.
And I had a lot of confidence initially in them, and now we're getting towards the tail end of this kind of, it looks like this run where Trent's a little older and George is 30, and, it hasn't happened quite yet. Kansas City sure looks a whole lot better right now, just after seeing them a couple weeks ago. how do you feel? I mean, about the regime? I mean, we all love John Lynch. We all respect the hell out of
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
I kind of totally agree with you. It's like I think Shanahan is absolutely the guy. I don't always agree. Like I didn't love his run play that set up a 50-yard field goal for Anders Carlson.
Right.
That wasn't my favorite call, and he's got some calls like that. But how much confidence do you have in this regime to push through and get it done and get that 6 Lombardi?
I kind of feel like it is going to happen. I just don't know who's going to take out the Chiefs before the Super Bowl and whatever year that happens to be, because Mahomes is just Mahomes. Every time I see him, I just, I have PTSD. But the concern for me with Kyle is, if you talk about winning the biggest games of his career, he's lost pretty much all of them. All right, going back to OC and Atlanta, 28-3. Keeps throwing the ball instead of just running the clock out, and Tom Brady does Tom Brady things. And then you look here, up 10 in the Super Bowl against Kansas City, and they can't hold that lead. Yes, Bosa was held on the long wasp play. Yes, the last year, same thing. You're up late, can't close. There's too many of these in a row, and Kyle, in my view, is turning into the Andy Reid of the Eagles, who everybody – regarded as a brilliant offensive mind, but, quote, couldn't win the big one until he got to KC and got Mahomes. So, look, we can parse out, running plays to set up this or that or, whatever the case may be. It's a lot better than Jim Tom Sula and Dennis Erickson. And it could be worse, everybody. It could be a lot worse. If the thing we're worried about is, they haven't won Super Bowls. There are teams that haven't even gotten close to the playoffs in years. I mean, look at the Cowboys. I mean, they make the playoffs. They haven't done anything for 3 decades. At least the Niners are getting there and taking their shot. They're not winning them, but at least they're there. I mean, we could do a whole other half-hour show on that alone, on Jerry and his kids, and just hire Jimmy Johnson back for a year or whatever. Just let him pick the players, because you don't know what you're doing.
Right. Jerry, I mean, I always wondered, would Jerry rather win, with somebody else pulling the strings, or lose with him and his kid doing it? And I think thus far we have the answer. Hey, Larry, awesome.
Evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome stuff, man. It is we got to do this more often. I watch you a ton. I love your post game Warrior stuff, and say hi to O'Donnell and Carrie and all the people. And we're big fans, man. So keep it rolling. You're the best, and we appreciate you coming on KNBR and rapping a little bit with us on the Niners.
Anytime you call, I'm answering, and we'll do a thing, whatever the thing is. I want to say this, I love the questions that you ask Kyle Shanahan in the Niners news conferences, because the questions make it obvious that you have done your homework and watched the game film and the all 22 and everything, because the way he reacts to your questions shows me that he respects your football knowledge. And not everybody's asking great questions all the time. So I really appreciate you generating sound bites for me so that I can run them on the news, because I know he's going to answer you with a good answer. So thank you for asking good questions. I appreciate that.
Well, and I appreciate Kyle for playing along, because, obviously he knows more football than I do. And he could probably shut me up in any number of ways, but you're right. He does seem to suffer fools gladly with me somehow, some way.
Stop. You're not. No, you know what you're talking about. And I think everybody in that room understands that as soon as you ask the question. It's crystal clear. So, I mean, there's others down there that just get next question, or yes, no answers. We don't have to name names, but you know who they are. So it's a different approach. It's a methodical, workmanlike approach, and I think it serves all of us well. So I appreciate you more than I can really express in words for doing a great job.
In the next segment, we will out all those subpar media people that don't ask good questions. No, we won't.
Well,
Larry, good stuff, man.
All right, man.
Have a great night. Thank you, sir. The great Larry Beil.